Whenever you conduct research, you must be concerned with ethics. In the general sense, ethics is concerned with the moral principles that govern a person's or group's behavior. In philosophy, there are a variety of ethical perspectives. In the case of human communication research, the primary purpose of ethics is to protect research participants. This video focuses on some key points relating to conducting research with human subjects, and this is the first of several videos on the subject of ethics in research. However, before we move to those key points, we should first clarify what a human subject is, and for that we'll turn to the United States Department of Health and Human Services that specifies, and I'm paraphrasing here, a living individual about whom a researcher obtains data through intervention or interaction with the individual, or identifiable private information. Note 2 points. First, that the data do not have to be collected directly from the living individual, but can be gathered about the individual with or without the individual's consent. And second, the researcher or investigator includes both professionals and students. Now let's turn to the key points relating to ethics in research using human subjects. The first and foremost being do no harm. Whatever research you conduct should not result in harm to the research subjects. And there are multiple types of harms: psychological, physical, legal, social, and economic. A classic example is the 1946 U.S. government's research experiments in Guatemala. The United States Public Health Service, funded by a grant from the U.S. National Institutes of Health, was allegedly interested in determining the effects of penicillin in preventing and treating sexually transmitted diseases. Now, apparently there weren't enough Guatemalans who had the targeted STDs, so researchers intentionally exposed over 1,300 research subjects to syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid. This incident, for which U.S. President Barack Obama officially apologized to the Guatemalans for in 2010, also violated several others of these key points, such as informed consent and voluntary participation. In Guatemala, the research subjects had no idea they were even participating in the research, much less gave their consent. While the preference is that there is written documentation to prove that informed consent was given and that participation is voluntary, oftentimes it's done orally. Another key point relating to ethics in research is that research participants can leave the study at any time. Again, not the case in Guatemala. In research, if a participant drops out, the researchers must toss all the data associated with that participant. And researchers are also expected to adhere to promises of anonymity and confidentiality. Anonymity means that the research is conducted without gathering or connecting a respondent's personal information that might give away his or her identity. If you're walking through a shopping mall and are stopped to do a survey and you don't provide your name, your telephone number, your address, etc., then that is an anonymous survey. Even if you answer questions about your ethnicity, income level, place of residence, because many people could be giving the same answers, the responses then cannot be traced back to you. Anonymity is different, however, from confidentiality, which means that while personal identifying information is collected, that data will not be provided to anyone as part of the research results. If you answer a survey via the telephone, that telephone number can be traced back to you. The researcher will record that an interview was conducted with a person at that telephone number, but your telephone number will eventually be stripped from your responses. And even then, reputable research firms might destroy the sampling frame where your telephone number is kept, so that even if subpoenaed for the information, the firm would be unable to provide it. Another major component of doing no harm to the study participants relates to honesty. Unless you have a justifiable reason otherwise, you should be honest with research participants about the study's purpose, who's conducting the study, etc. Now notice that I said justifiable reason. The American Psychological Association acknowledges that there are some studies that cannot be conducted without the use of deception, as when the benefits may outweigh the risks, and they therefore require researchers to abide by a code of ethics. An example of when deception was considered justified is the 1968 research experiment on the bystander apathy effect, studied in response to the Kitty Genovese murder in 1964. Researchers wanted to see why kitties 38 neighbors who were aware that she was being murdered did nothing about it at the time. So they devised an experiment where university students participated in a discussion about personal problems, using a microphone and speakers so they wouldn't be able to see the other discussion group members. One of the other participants appears to have an epileptic seizure during the discussion, and researchers wanted to know how long it would take someone to stand up, leave the room, and look for the experimenters to ask for help. Now, obviously, the experiment wouldn't be effective if participants knew what was really happening in advance, so some element of deception was necessary. And in this case, the APA's Code of Ethics requires a debrief after an experiment, as a lack of debrief might result in psychological harm to the study participants. Regardless of whether the research involves deception or not, researchers are still expected to debrief the participants after the study, or at least give the participants the opportunity to be debriefed. In most cases, debriefing means that the participants must be informed about the true purpose of the study, who is conducting the study, and what the research will be used for. Well, if you think about it, it all circles back to that first point again: do no harm. That's the single underlying premise. Processing time. What is the underlying principle behind working with human subjects in research? Well, of course, now you know it's do no harm. What is the difference between anonymity and confidentiality? And finally, is deception in research ever justified? While future videos will cover more related to ethics in human subjects research, you should now have a better understanding of the underlying principles related to the concept.